There have been some more Goblins vs. Gnomes cards released. Let's see what they're like. First of all, I want to talk about one of the cards I've already reviewed, but I need to make a correction on because I reviewed it under bad info. That card is Gnomish Experimenter. So, originally in my review, I said it was underrated by people. People thought it was garbage, but I thought it still had some possibility. That's mostly because that's partly because I thought that the chicken was a 0 mana 1/1, but as it turns out, chicken is a 1 mana 1/1 as clarified by Ben Brode. Like I always say, if you move one card's mana cost up or down by 1, the value of it changes quite a bit. There's a big difference between a 0 mana 1/1 and a 1 mana 1/1. A 0 mana 1/1 is, of course, better. How much better is it? Through unknown calculations, I'm going to say that a 0 mana 1/1 is worth about half a card in value, whereas a 1 mana 1/1 is worth like 1/3 a card in value. I mean, I was basically calculating that in the worst case scenario, it was a slightly better Razorfen Hunter, when you didn't actually need to rely on the minion. Now, though, you don't get the freebie 1/1, and you actually have to pay 1 mana for it, so some of the times it's going to be a 4 mana kind of Razorfen Hunter. The card is still better than people think it is. It's just, I wouldn't play it now because the worst case is no longer a Razorfen Hunter. Worst case is a 4 mana Razorfen Hunter. Warrior gets Shieldmaiden. A very basic card here. 6 mana 5/5. That's of course bad stats. The Battlecry gain 5 armor. When this card first came out, I thought it was really, really bad. But over a few days, I've kind of tempered my opinion on it. It does compare favorably to the Paladin's Guardian of Kings, 7 mana, 5/6. So you lose 1 mana, you lose 1 health, you lose 1 health gain. The armor gain is armor instead of health, which is significantly better because of Shield Slam. I don't think it's going to be good enough to warrant a spot in the Warrior control deck because there are so many cards already competing for it, like Cairn and Sylvanas, and even Hogger, and Black Knight. And it's tough to fit another 6-drop in there. If this makes the Warrior control deck, and it's going to make the control deck, obviously, because an aggro deck doesn't want anything to do with a 6 mana 5/5, it would probably be a 1-of, similar to how Guardian of Kings is a 1-of in Paladin. But in my opinion, it's not going to make the Warrior control deck. In Arena, this card, mostly it's about stats and not about life gain in Arena. So I rate this card somewhere around the level of Wargolem, which is to say it's like an average card. Not great, not bad. Foereaper 4000, an exciting legendary card revealed. Some people have hypothesized that I would really like this card because it seems like super value to attack into an opponent's minion and then kill another 2 perhaps, so you can get 3-for-1s with each attack. But my problem with the Foereaper is its mana cost. Similar to Dr. Boom, to Mechgineer, Thermoplug, it just costs too much mana. And it's a big legendary, it has a big effect. And it has 9 health, that's pretty good for 8 mana, but it just doesn't do anything the turn it comes in. And it's quite slow. Think it might have some possibility in the Druid ramp deck where you get this out fast enough and then you just permanently lock down the opponent's board with it. That's assuming they don't have any solution to your Foereaper. I don't see it being run in control decks. Some people have compared it to Kel'Thuzad, which also costs 8 mana and is also 6 attack, which dodges Big Game Hunter. Foereaper has a slight benefit over Kel'Thuzad in that you don't have to have a board to play it. Kel'Thuzad has a slight benefit in that if you have a board and then you play Kel'Thuzad, you super win. 9 health is tough to deal with any deck which doesn't have a spell or an efficient way to remove it. But the problem is sometimes when you get to 8 mana, you might already be facing a board that's wildly out of control, and Foereaper isn't enough to stop it. So my assessment is that I think it's going to be too slow. I don't think it's going to be great. If it sees play, I would think the first deck it would see play in would be the Ramp Druid deck. On the bright side, needs Old Shredder God better, because you can summon Foereaper randomly with it. In Arena, Foereaper will be a fairly good card. Arena is slower. You should be able to get your 8 mana, 9 health card out there. And it is all about board control. So Foereaper will most likely be able to 2 for 1, 3 for 1 your opponent. And sometimes you'll get it out and then they won't have an answer and then you just reap them down. Jeeves! What a cool little card. I'm a little surprised it's not a legendary because it seems to be a specific name and it has a very unique card text. This card in Constructed is going to serve one major role, which is you put it in an aggro deck, like a very fast aggro deck. You drop your hand and then you Jeeves, and that's gonna mean you paid 4 mana for 1/4 and you drew 3 cards, which is a really, really good deal. I had a tough time evaluating this card. I don't think it fits most mid-range decks unless those mid-range decks don't have much card draw ability. Like Shamans, for example, they run Gnomish Experimenter, which might be better than Jeeves because Shamans don't really dump their hand that fast. Now, Jeeves has been compared with Gnomish Experimenter quite a bit. It has 1 less attack, same amount of health, same amount of mana, and definitely stronger or weaker than Gnomish Experimenter based on how many cards you have in your hand, and also importantly, how many cards your opponent has in their hand, because it is a symmetrical effect, but don't be put off by the symmetrical effect, because if you are playing Jeeves, your deck is most likely going to be a deck which can abuse Jeeves. So yeah, it's going to be put into super rush, low-cost cards, like perhaps the Paladin Rush deck, which isn't currently a thing, but could be. Rogue Rush deck could just fit right into Hunter. Slightly less good in Zoo because they've already got the natural mechanism to draw cards with their hero ability. I think Jeeves might bring some life to decks that currently are unviable because they run out of gas too quickly. In Arena, this card is going to be really sucky because it's really rare that you can draft a fast rush Arena deck. But hey, like with Jeeves, maybe you'll be more inclined to do so. And if you do have a very fast rush Arena deck and you pick up like 2 Jeeves, then hey, that could be really good. On average, Jeeves will be a very bad card though. In Arena. In Constructed, it will open up a few new possibilities. And finally, the latest card revealed, Ancestor's Call for Shaman. So I'll state the obvious, I guess. That's a pretty heavy mana cost, and therefore you better be Ancestors calling something that costs like 8, 9, or 10. And if you do, you should generally assume that the opponent will be Ancestors calling something that costs, like on average, it really depends on the matchup, but I'm just going to say on average 4 mana. So that means you're using 4 mana to like get out maybe a 9 mana or an 8 mana card, but you have to discount it by the opponent's 4 mana usage of Ancestor's Call, which is a really rough average because if you're playing against control decks, like sometimes they get a better card than what you Ancestors Call out sometimes. If you're playing against Zoo, it's good, but like since it's Shaman, like some people have said, oh, if you get out Earth Elemental, that's pretty good. You don't pay the overload for it. It is pretty good. And like that's a very specific situation though. I was tempted at first to say like, oh, this card is better than you think it is because it is a very combo-oriented card. You would obviously put it in a deck which ran a big card in it and make the most use of it so the symmetric effect isn't as big a deal. You don't get the Battle Cry effect, and I'd say like one of the best situations is you get Sneed's Shredder or Ysera with it. Suppose the opponent has a removal for Ysera, then that's basically a 2 for 1. And you have to be in the very specific case where you have one big card in your hand and the Ancestor's Call. This is a lot better than Alarmobot because the Alarmobot requires 1 turn of surviving. And there is something to be said about a turn for Ysera. It's very difficult to deal with that, but it's just that so many pieces, so many parts have to align for your Ancestor's Call to get through. So my general assessment is that this is either going to be a really, really good deck, or it's going to be a terrible deck. And I'm definitely leaning towards it's going to be a terrible deck. It's like one of those cards where if you costed it at 3, it might actually be degenerate. And I'm sure it was tested out quite a bit. It's like, Oh, turn 3, I'm gonna play Ancestor's Call. I get a Ysera. You lose. Like, even on turn 4, if you were to cast that and get Ysera, it's very difficult for many decks to deal with that, even though they're getting a freebie also. It's just too situational. It seems like a kind of funsies card, which some people will try to build a deck around like Alarma Bot, but will fail horribly. And that's my assessment. In Arena, this card is awful. This card is the worst in Arena. I don't even need to talk about why it's bad, but I will anyways. In Arena, it's much harder to take advantage of symmetric effects. You can't actually draft a Ysera in your Arena deck consistently. And even if you do get the Ysera, and then you have the option to pick Ancestor's Call, which means you got the specific legendary and then the epic. You have to draw both together, and you have to not have any of the bad cards. No, don't pick this in Arena. It's the worst card in Arena. And that is those 4 cards.
Goblins and gnomes. Goblins and gnomes. Both are super brilliant, but you would never know. Everything they seem to make is faulty or explode. Perfecting imperfection. Goblins and gnomes.
Unleash Goblin Fury!
For Gnome Ragon!